before history carved its first symbols into stone, before civilization stacked its first bricks into cities, before even memory dared whisper across generations, there was life. Raw, untamed, brutal. And at the heart of that primal world walked a kindred being, not alien, not myth, but family. The Neanderthal. For too long, we've buried them beneath stereotypes grunting cavemen, evolutionary mistakes, a forgotten footnote in humanity's rise. But the truth is far more intimate and far more extraordinary. What if they didn't just survive the Ice Age but shaped it? What if they dreamed, grieved, fought, and loved just as deeply as we do? This isn't a story of extinction. It's a story of existence. And tonight, we don't look at fossil sway, meet a person. So if you're ready to see the shadows of prehistory come to life, like this video, share it with those who still think Neanderthals were beasts, and subscribe to Prehistoric Shadows, where ancient lives are remembered with truth, emotion, and wonder. The wind howls through the valley like a ghost mourning what has not yet passed. Snow blankets the ground outside, thick and merciless. But deep inside a limestone cave, firelight dances across the stone walls, painting shadows that tell stories older than language. This is no temple, no paliseth, is a womb of warmth carved by time and necessity. A woman lies on a bed of moss, furs tucked around her trembling form. Her breath is ragged, her brow glistens with sweat. Around her, other women kneel not in panic, but with the calm of those who've seen many births and many deaths. They hum softly. It is not a song. It is a rhythm, ancient and steady, grounding the mother to the world of the living. There are no spoken names here, no certificates, no midwives trained in sterile rooms. Identity is forged not in words, but in bonds through scent, skin, the pressure of a hand held in agony, the warmth of shared breath, and then the cry. It cuts through the chamber like a bird-breaking sky. The newborn girl, barely moments old, is not fragile. Her arms flail, her chest heaves, her gaze, unfocused yet fierce, scans the flickering firelight. She is thick-boned, strong-necked. Her fists curl not in confusion but in defiance. She has entered a world not built for safety, but for resilience. She is Neanderthal. She will never know that name, of course. She will never hear the word prehistoric or be told that her kind is extinct. To her, this world stone, smoke, and blood is all there is and all there ever was. A small hand is dipped in red ochre and pressed against the cave wall. Not hers yet, but one day her lineage already speaks without sound. The fire is fed, the night continues, and outside wolves howl not in menace but in rhythm. This birth, this singular breath of life, is just one thread in a vast, unbroken weave of being. Around her, life does not pause. A brother sharpens a spear, not far from where his sister was just born. A grandmother grinds wild seeds into a gritty paste with rhythm born of repetition. There is no ceremony, no indulgence, only continuity. In this world, to be born is not a miracle. It is a challenge answered. She is not greeted with lullabies or whispered dreams, but with the creak of bone tools, the smell of ash, the brush of fur. These are her lullabies. This is her cradle. She sleeps in pulses, waking not with hunger, but awareness, the flame, the breath of her mother, the stir of movement. From her first day, she is immersed in the visceral language of survival, temperature, taste, scent, pressure, movement. There is no plastic, no blanket, no artificial heat, but there is fire, there is touch, there is the silent understanding that to exist, to continue, is to adapt immediately and without question. And so begins the life of this Neanderthal girl, not as a chapter in a book of extinction, but as a beating heart in a living world. A daughter of stone and smoke, a child of endurance. Her story is not a relic, it is a mirror, and it begins here where breath first meets frost. From her earliest steps, life was not a gentle guidate, was a demanding teacher. In a world where hesitation could cost your life, the child grew quickly into awareness. She learned by watching, by mimicking, by failing and bleeding and getting back up. Her older brothers knelt by the fire, striking obsidian stones against hard antler, shaping tools that could cut through hide and bone. Every flake of stone that broke off carried a lesson in pressure and precision. Her grandmother, with hands calloused like tree bark, stirred crushed berries and roots into thick red paint. The pigment, daubed onto cave walls, told stories not with words but with symbol spirals for the sun, handprints for the dead, and animal shapes for spirits that moved between worlds. And the child watched, wide-eyed, absorbing meaning through motion, rhythm, and color. By 5, she knew not to touch the purple flower that grew near the cold streamlets. Leaves could stop a heartbeat. She could spot wolf tracks by their gait and hear the difference between falling snow and an approaching predator. Danger wasn't a concept, it was a daily rhythm. By 7, she was no longer just watching, she was participating. Her small footprints followed those of the men as they stalked caribou through deep snow. She learned to move in silence, to read broken twigs, to listen for the hush before a flight of birds. There was no school, no lectures, no waiting to grow up. The tribe had no luxury for childhood in the modern sense. Every member, no matter how small, carried the weight of survival. You hunted, or you starved. You remembered, or you repeated mistakes that could kill. And yet there was joy, laughter around the fire as someone imitated a startled bear, games with carved sticks and bones that taught hand-eye coordination. A lullaby hummed through a mother's teeth as she scraped sinew from hide. This was not misery, it was meaning. A childhood measured not in toys but in skills, not in birthdays but in rites of passage. The people didn't write, but they remembered. In the smoke patterns above the fire, they told the stories of storms survived, hunts won, and losses mourned. In the rhythm of drum beats and foot stomps, they encoded warnings and wisdom. And in their scars, both the visible ones and those stitched into their spirits, they passed on a heritage of resilience. Every cut healed tougher. Every lesson learned became instinct. She did not memorize facts. She became them. The tribe moves like shadows through the fog. Firelight bounces off stone spears. The girl now 8 crouches low, eyes narrowed. She is no longer just a learner. She is a link in the chain of survival. She does not speak. She listens. She moves. She endures. Adolescence comes not with parties or celebration, but with pain and purpose. For the young Neanderthal girl, the shift is both physical and spiritual. Her body changes, bones lengthen, muscles tighten, and so do the eyes of her tribe. She is no longer a child sheltered by the circle of firelight. She is expected to contribute, to face death, to feed others. She joins her first hunt at 13. The morning is breathless, brittle with cold. Ice crystals lace the edge of her fur-wrapped tunic. The air itself feels ancient. Elders walk in silence. Their footsteps leave prints that vanish in the blowing snow. They carry spears of carved stone and hardened wood, shaped over generations. She carries hers tooth shaft longer than her own height, the tip bound with sinew and flint. It is not her size that gives her place among them, it is her resolve. For weeks, she has trained, stalking small game, mimicking the elders' gestures, listening for the hush that falls over the tundra just before blood spills. They have tracked the mammoth for days, a male, large and scarred, left behind by its herd, wounded, but not broken, dangerous. The tribe spreads out in a crescent as snow begins to fall. The girl crouches low behind a boulder. Her heart is a drumbeat in her ears. She watches the woolly titan appear through the Foga mountain of fur, tusks, and fury. It bellows, the ground vibrates, but she does not run. She waits, counts the rhythm of its breath, times the moment when its head lowers. Then she moves. She runs forward with the others, screaming not from fear but from focus. Her spear is heavy, but her grip is true. She hurls it with every ounce of strength in her body. It flies, spinning once in the air, before burying deep into the beast's side. Others follow. The mammoth cries out, staggers, falls. The earth trembles. Silence returns, thick and absolute. What follows is not celebration, but reverence. The tribe gathers around the fallen creature not as victors, but as kin paying respects. Prayers are spoken without words. Hands are laid upon the great hide. Breath is exhaled in thanks. That night, the fire burns high. Fat hisses in the flames. The girl sits still as red paint is drawn across her cheeks. Then, with a bone needle, the elder smears a line of the mammoth's blood across her brow. She has crossed a threshold. No longer a learner, no longer a shadow. She is a hunter now. In the lore of her people, this moment will not be recorded on stone or skin, but in story. Around future fires, younger children will hear of the girl who faced the giant, who ran into the snowstorm and returned painted in blood, not her own. She will carry the memory not as pride but as duty, because every hunt from now on is not for glory. It is for the tribe, for the newborns wrapped in hide, for the elders who no longer walk far, for those too weak to hold spears. She is 13, and she knows the weight of survival. And though she does not know it yet, her descendants will remember the strength in her bones. It will echo through time, through DNA, through instinct, through legacy. Because this moment was never just about the hunt. It was the birth of the warrior. As the seasons shift and her body matures, so too does her inner world. The hunts no longer thrill her as they once did. In the silence between survival, questions arise quiet, persistent. Where do the spirits of the dead go? Why do stars return to the same places in the sky? Why does fire dance, but water doesn't? Why do some people die and others live? These questions are not spoken aloud. The Neanderthal language is rooted in gesture, emotion, tone. But even unspoken, the questions live in her breath, in the pause before she sleeps, in the way she watches the sky instead of the fire, in the ache behind her eyes when she stares at the bones of a fallen comrade. Her people bury their dead with a care that suggests belief. Flowers pressed between fingers, red ochre painted on cold skin, bodies curled like sleepers under stone blankets. It is ritual. It is reverence. It is an echo of something they feel, if not name. Death is not merely the end of function, it is the beginning of memory. The tribe gathers not just to mourn, but to remember, to connect, to carry. She begins to linger at these grave sites longer than others. Once, she places a shell beside a fallen hunter, a piece of river-polished beauty with no practical use, but its curve reminds her of the moon. Another time, she carves a line into the stone by his head, watching as water slowly fills the groove, a silent offering, a ripple that mirrors her thoughts. At night, she dreams not of prey or predators, but of spirals, of distant thunder that speaks, of shapes moving in the sky, of hands reaching out across time. She dreams of her grandmother's breath turning into birds, of her own shadow standing still as the stars swirl overhead. There are those who say Neanderthals had no imagination, that they lived moment to moment, reacting to the cold world around them like animals. But the evidence carved in stone says otherwise. On the walls of caves, she helps etch patterns, repeated spirals, interlocking circles, scratches that follow the paths of stars. Her grandmother teaches her to pierce shells, to weave sinew into necklaces. Not for warmth, not for function, for something else, for beauty, for memory, for love, perhaps, though they do not call it that. They do not draw what they see, they draw what they feel. The arc of a mammoth's tusk becomes the curve of the moon. The flutter of a bird becomes a prayer. A single handprint on stone becomes a declaration. I was here. And that, too, is imagination. She sings at funerals not songs as we know them, but tones that rise and fall with the wind. They mean sorrow. They mean goodbye. They mean, you were here. They mean, I will remember. Sometimes she sings alone, to no one, just to the night. And as she sits in a quiet cave, tracing lines into dirt, she understands something most Homo sapiens have long forgotten. To dream is not weakness, it is the fire beneath the stone. To wonder is not a waste, it is the bridge between survival and soul. And even in a world of ice and blood, they dreamed. Then came the others. They arrived not as shadows but as firelight on unfamiliar faces. Homo sapiens, taller, leaner, with a restlessness in their eyes. Their movements were quick, their voices strange. They carried objects wrapped in intention-bone flutes, beads and blades of astonishing refinement. At first, it was not fear, but fascination. The two peoples watched each other across the rivers, in the forests, at the borders of the known. One child mimicked the other's call. One woman admired the curve of a carved spear. One fire answered another, from cave to cave, like flickers of ancient curiosity. But curiosity is fragile. Resources were scarce, winter was long, and where need grows sharper, peace dulls quickly. The competition began silently over water, over game, over ground, sacred to both. And then, as always, silence gave way to sound, cries, clashes, the tearing of flesh. Some Neanderthals, like her, resisted. They defended their caves, their kin, their memory. Others fled, vanishing into the deep mountains or the dense woods. And some, bound by neither fear nor hate, interbred blending histories in blood. Our protagonist did not hate, but she knew what it meant to be forgotten. She fought not to conquer but to remain, to make it impossible for her people to be erased. She hunted beside her father one last time, tracing the old routes, listening for the heartbeat of the land. But the world was changing, faster than even the elders could name. Sacred rivers ran with unfamiliar footprints. The sounds in the night no longer matched the songs of her childhood. One night, she approached the boundary where the two peoples met. A young Homo sapiens male stood across from her. They did not speak, they only looked. And something ancient passed between them, fear, yes, but also recognition. Not enemies, not yet, but not the same. She returned home and carved her story deeper into the stone. Circles within circles, lines branching like trees. A memory, encoded for those who might one day return. For those who might wonder who had once stood here. She knew she would not live to see the outcome of their meeting, but she knew the earth would remember. She could not stop the future, but she could mark the past. And in that actin, that resistance to disappearance lived longer than flesh. To be remembered, she knew, was the last hunt of all. And so she hunted, not with spear but with memory, not with muscle but with meaning. Her legacy would not echo in conquest, but in questions. And long after the fire dimmed, and the bones were dust, and even the names were forgotten, her mark remained. A spiral etched into stone, a silence that sang, a handprint that dared time to forget. Her breath rattles, shallow and uneven, catching in her throat like the final crackle of fire before it fades. She lies on the frozen ground, blood slowly pooling beneath her ribs, staining the snow a deep, haunting red. The sky above her is wide and endless, scattered with stars, those same stars she once watched in wonder as a child, trying to trace their paths with charcoal on stone. Now, she watches them with blurred vision, not out of curiosity, but in farewell. Each breath is harder than the last, but her eyes remain open. She will not close them. Not yet. Her body trembles, not from cold, but from the final, ancient instinct to live, to stay, to see just a little longer. Around her, the world is silent. The mammoth trails lie empty. The fire songs have faded. But she can still feel it, the memory of a hunt, the laughter of her brother, the rhythm of her grandmother's voice, singing a low, wordless tune to the bones. She is alone, but she is not forgotten. The tribe finds her at dawn. There is no wailing, no screaming, only reverence. Her body is lifted with care, wrapped in furs, blood wiped gently from her cheeks. They know what she gave her strength, her fire, her voice. She was not just a hunter, she was a witness, a dreamer, a link in a chain that stretched backward through time. They carry her to the sacred place, deep within the mountain, a cavern painted with the colors of centuries' handprints in ochre, spirals in soot, animals that no longer roam. She will join the others here, among the bones of elders, among the whispering dust. Her body is curled into the fetal position, as is their way, as if returning to the womb of the earth. Red ochre is smeared on her brow, a shell-smooth and moon chapitis placed in her palm. Not for utility, but for meaning. They place her beside the wall where she once carved a symbol no one else understood, a line bending into a spiral, intersected by stars. And then they sing. Not a song of grief, but of gratitude, of remembrance, a hum that rises and falls with the wind, a rhythm that moves through bone and stone, through air and ash. They sing for her spirit. They sing for their own. She will not be remembered by name. There were no names, only patterns of sound and scent and feeling. But her legacy will be imprinted in the soil, in the stories, in the children who wear her necklaces and trace her carvings with reverent fingers. And her DNA? It will echo, through centuries, through ice and fire and empire, through bloodlines that split and merge and wander. In you, in me, we carry her, in our bones, in our memories that are not our own, in the instincts we do not question, in the dreams we do not understand. She was not a myth, not a monster, not a mistake. She was real. And though her body turned to dust, she outlived the ice, outlived the silence, outlived the forgetting. The last breath she took was not the end, it was a seed. And we are its bloom. She was not a beast. She was not a footnote. She was a sister of our species. And though her world is gone, her story lives. Her story lives not because it was recorded in books or etched in metal. It lives because it was passed down in silence and echo, in red ochre handprints and bones curled beneath stone. It lives in the questions we still ask about who we are, where we came from, and what it means to be human. In every strand of DNA that carries her spark, in every buried memory that finds voice in our dreams, she continues. Not in myth, but in matter. Not in textbooks, but in our blood. She was not forgotten. We simply forgot to look deeper. If this story moved you, if it challenged your idea of what a Neanderthal was, or reminded you that even the ancient past holds echoes of love, loss, and humanity, then we invite you to honor her memory in the only way we still can. Like this video, share it with those who still think history is only dates and tools, and most importantly, subscribe to Prehistoric Shadows. Because here, we tell stories that textbooks have no room for. We uncover ancient lives with truth, with soul, and with reverence. We believe that behind every fossil was a person. And if we remember them, if we see them, then maybe, just maybe, we'll understand ourselves a little better too. So, join us. Let their